Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Data Science Hangout. I'm Rachel Dempsey. I lead customer marketing at Posit. This hangout is our open space to hear what's going on in the world of data across different industries and connect with others facing similar things as you. So we get together here every Thursday at the same time, same place. So if you're watching this as a recording and want to join us in the future, there's details to add it to your calendar below. And just make sure it adds it for 12 Eastern time so you can join us live. And I know from our Hangout survey, people really enjoy getting to connect with others here in this Hangout space. So if you are interested in connecting with others, I want to encourage people to say hello in the chat, maybe introduce yourself, your role, where you're based, or if you want to share your LinkedIn. It's a nice way to make friends here in the Hangout. We're all dedicated to keeping this the friendly and welcoming space that you all have made it, and love hearing from you no matter your years of experience, titles, industry, or languages that you work in. Something I sometimes forget to add here is if you're hiring, please feel free to share those roles in the chat as well. Love to see those shared here. And also 100% okay if you just want to listen in today, although we love getting to hear from you live. So there's 3 ways that you can ask questions or provide your own perspective. So first, you could raise your hand on Zoom, and I will call on you to jump in. Second, you could put questions in the chat and just put a little asterisk next to it if you want me to read it. Maybe you're in a coffee shop or walking your dog or something. And then third, we have a Slido link, which I'm sure Curtis shared already, where you can ask questions anonymously as well. So with that, I am so excited to introduce our 2 co-hosts today. So we have Jing Huang joining us, SVP of Bioinformatics and Data Science at Veracyte, as well as Ning Leng, ad-interim Global Head of Data Sciences Acceleration at Roche-Genentech. And Ning and Jing, I'd love to have you both kick us off with having you introduce yourself a little bit and your role, but also something you do outside of work too.
Very nice to meet everybody. Hope you hear me okay. My name is Ning. I currently work at Roche-Genentech. I'm based in South San Francisco, and I'm part of this huge organization, data science organization under Roche-Genentech. We have about 900 people in our organization, working on clinical trial data, everything related to basically a patient human level data, clinical trial data, real world data, biomarker data, etc. So currently I'm the interim global lead of a sub-team of this large organization called the Data Science Acceleration. We are about 40 people team, and we are focusing on this a transition to open source software, transition to modernized solution, infrastructure, etc. Yeah, and very nice to meet everybody. And also, I would love to also see what are everybody coming from in the audience. So please feel free to use the chat to share what industry are you in and where are you coming from. I think that'll be really helpful for our chat today. And outside of work, I like outdoor activities. Maybe one fun fact is that earlier this year we did a Machu Picchu 4-day 3-night hike, which was amazing. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Ning. Jing, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Sure. So my name's Jing. So I work for Veracyte. And Veracyte, if you don't know, is a much smaller company compared to Roche, but we are a public company. We actually specialize in providing diagnostic insight using genomic data. All of our models are machine learning models using genomic data as an input, and then give the critical information to the patient, physician to better manage the patients. And we have about a dozen products on the market, fully regulated and all that. So as a senior VP, I actually deal with data almost everywhere about data all the time, hopefully not all at once. Biostat clinical studies, and as I mentioned, we have our machine learning model are the key core engine of our product, and my team developed all those machine learning models and bioinformatics that goes through sequencing and all that to derive the genomic input to feed into training of those machine learning models. And, we also do all the experimental design, assay optimization. So just literally everything everywhere about data we work on, we lead. Outside work, I like outdoorsy stuff too. We just came back from Europe of a small trip from a couple of days in Vienna, a couple of days in Budapest. I also love gardening. Although my passion is disproportionately higher than my skill set. So there are a lot of dead plants along the way, but nevertheless, there are also ones that are thriving. Really happy to be in this forum and get to know you all, and look forward to our intimate and exciting conversation. One more thing I do need to say, I see it's recorded. I do want to mention this will be my opinion, and my opinion only, doesn't represent Veracyte or any of the nonprofit I work for. Oh, last thing, I love to work in nonprofit just like Ning. So that's how we met each other. We were both leaders in BBSW, the Bay Area Biopharma Biotech Statistic Workshop. And if you're interested, we can tell you more about it. We have our annual conference coming up in October.
Awesome. Thank you. I see some love for the aquarium as your virtual background here too.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, because I talk very fast, and this reminds me to slow down.
I love that. Well, I get to kick things off as we wait for questions to come in from everybody, but I know the three of us have talked a bit about enabling data-driven decision-making. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about what that means for each of your organizations today.
Sure, I can kick it off. So for what I realize is, data science statistics are fundamental and crucial for product development. Everybody knows that, right? Either in drug development, like in Ning's world, or in diagnostic development in my world. However, we can do much more, right? We can help almost every step of the business, and we should, right? In nowadays, data is so readily available, from supply chain to how to get more effective in patient claims. And we are doing that in Veracyte. So, there are many more things, and it should be like a smart business decision should be one available based on data and evidence, right? And we have a unique advantage of sitting at that juncture with access to the right data and with the skill set to derive that important data insight to help better the business. So I felt like it's opportunity, but also a wonderful responsibility for us to make our business better and benefit the patients. Ning, anything to add?
Yeah, totally agree, Jing. Yeah, maybe just like dive a little bit more into the pharma space. Yeah, exactly as Jing mentioned. I think traditionally, biostat has been a very important, or like data science has been a very important role in the pharma industry for many years. And if we look at a kind of like a traditional job description, I think a lot of emphasis is on kind of how we design trial. Once we have a successful phase 1 or phase 2, how we design the confirmatory trial based on the scientific findings, etc. But nowadays, I think with totally agree with Jing that there are so much data out there, and there are so much we can influence our stakeholders. For example, we have manufacturing data, we have those kind of site performance data in terms of their enrollment speed, in terms of their data quality, and we have those kind of competitor data or research data, real world data, to let us know that whether the control arm assumption we had from earlier phase trials still holds in the current situation. And also for reimbursement, maybe there is a so in some cases, there is a meaningful, statistically meaningful difference over there, but whether that magnitude of improvement is sufficient for reimbursement in certain countries, etc. So there are so much we can do by bringing different type of data, different modality of data together. Yeah.
Thank you. I see Mike already asked a question here in the chat. Mike, do you want to jump in first?
Hi, yeah. Nice to be here. Nice to see Ning and Jing here. Ning, your job title is something around accelerating data science. So what does accelerating involve? How do you accelerate things?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, so for my team, our team actually are really focused on data science software and data science infrastructure. Yeah, so like in the past, kind of like reflecting on what Jing and myself said, in the past, we oftentimes like follow up a trial in a more linear way, etc. And like there are very well defined output to be generated, tables to be generated, output like graphs to be generated. But now with the kind of like richness of data, we on one side, like with the opportunity of open source tools like those automation, like advanced technologies, like there is ways for us to automate many of the stuff. Like that's one thing like what my team is focusing on. So like if we can have like very good standard in a certain disease area or certain or certain like yeah, in certain disease area, then we can automate a lot of things. So we don't need to do this like more like transactional type of analysis repeatedly. On the other side, like with all those modern technologies, modern database, and then also tools and methodologies, there is a great opportunities for us to bring different data together. Like from Roche, we do have a big initiative like trying to have this like large curated data set by combining data from different molecules together, so that like we can have a very rich data set to help us do this reverse translation for the next generation of drug targeted discovery, etc. Yeah.
So accelerating isn't, well, it's many faceted, right?
There's many facets of that. I think, yeah.
Doing things more efficiently, quicker, more routinely, more automated, as well as the kind of sciencey bit, if you like, of feeding back and
exactly
the right things at the right time.
Exactly. I think like if I think about our data science team, exactly to your point, like there are two facets. There is the like deliverable execution part of that. And for that part, we try to automate as much as possible. We try to bring in standard, etc. And there is also this like insight generation, scientific research part. On that part, we want to make it as easy as possible for the scientists to generate new insight so that can be feedback to earlier research. Exactly, yeah.
If some people listening in today might not be at this point yet in their organizations, how do you recommend convincing your company to use data, not just for like technical solutions, but also for the strategy planning?
I can chime in with some experience, right? So first of all, it's usually easier to do quick wins, right? Whether it's small or big, quick is important, right? And also hopefully at least the initial investment is small. You can face it, right? Otherwise you say, hey, I need $3 million for 3 years. You can see the result, at least for small company with shallow pocket, like, oh, okay, maybe later, right? So you want small wins. And also you have to translate or at least speaking in the language where the leadership is more open to listen. For example, our company went through leadership change. That happens to all companies. Previously, it's very, the leadership has more of a science background. So convincing them for the scientific breakthrough, how that directly benefit patients, it's important, right? It's easier to get buy-in. But recently, our leadership has a much stronger finance business background. The end goal is always benefit patient, but you have to come in from operational efficiency, how quicker you can touch more patients, increase the volume of the test, right? From that angle to get buy-in. So I found like small, not necessarily small, but quick wins to build the trust and speaking the language that the leadership will be open to listen, they're more familiar with, is very important to get into the strategic space to have data insight impact.
I totally agree. Jing actually have a recent example that it was like my biggest learning was basically being specific, being concrete, and identify those quick wins, actually driving the impact. Yeah, the example I want to share a little bit is basically, I think started from maybe a year or two ago. Within Roche, we have like this very strong interest of making our trials more inclusive. We realized that like nowadays, like I think the clinical trial, because we measure more stuff, so the clinical trials have longer and longer like inclusion exclusion criteria. And then that means like you have a smaller and smaller patient population over there. So basically we really want to make our trials more inclusive and then try to pressure test using data to pressure test that whether this is really a concern or this is just a hypothesis, so that we push that just in case this patient population like will have safety risk for our experimental drug, etc. So I think in the very beginning of the initiative, actually we experienced one problem, like someone called it like the nodding head problem. So if we present this concept, everybody agree with it, but we didn't see the needle being moved. We didn't see an actual difference on the studies. People all agree with the concept, but like people don't know what action to take on. Yeah, so what we did, what has been very helpful is we really kind of like provide this like white glove service to one particular study team and sit together with them and then pressure test all the inclusion exclusion criteria and use real world data to really pressure test that, okay, you put this one in, but whether there's really evidence to show that like excluding this patient population will de-risk our trial. And we came up with some very concrete suggestions. And what we did, the next step is basically look at all the protocols in other trials, like with similar molecule, and then to see whether they include similar language. And then we show the management team that basically, look, we have this number of trials with exactly the same language over there, and there is no strong justification of including this language. And what additional evidence you want to see for us to remove this language for all those trials, and how many more patients potentially we can enroll like by removing this one. Yeah, so I found that was very helpful than kind of having this more hand-waving statement saying that we all should optimize our inclusion exclusion criteria. Yeah.
Very true. And it's also advantage to our side, right? If you can quantify the impact, right?
Yeah, exactly.
With solid data, then it's always more convincing. Absolutely.
Yeah. I see, Abigail, you asked a question about hiring a little bit earlier. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks. So how do you, because there's this data science, but there's also all the subject matter expertise, how do you think about sort of hiring for that? Like, do you hire data scientists who also have the subject matter background, or do you train them up in data science, or are they just like separate roles? Like there's the scientists and then there's the data scientists.
I can share a little bit from Genentech, and maybe Jing can share in your company. Yeah, so because we are a huge organization, like we have like 900 people globally, you can imagine that definitely we have people who are more like generalists. So like there are people, we want them to be like equipment to take different roles, etc. But we also kind of like hire very, very specialized talent. For example, imaging talent or real world data experts, biomarker like genomic experts, etc. Yeah, so I would say that like for our hiring, I think for junior roles, especially when we hire master grads, we don't really look into specific kind of like specialty. So like what we look into is more curiosity and the ability to learn, collaboration skills, etc. Yeah, but like for those more specialized roles, like we may look into more senior people. Yeah.
Yeah, I can add a little bit. Definitely similar theme for our company, which is much smaller. So we are definitely very focused on the business need, and it can change from not only year to year, but quarter to quarter. Sometimes there is a very focused need on a specific area, and we foresee that will last at least 2 to 3 years. For example, there is a big need on assay optimization right now. And then we need bioinformatics who are just extremely familiar with RNA sequencing assay, right? And then there are other needing different function. We need that is almost like kind of wearing all kinds of hats and be fluid, then it is less about a specific skill, but there's just a general focus on the data science or data engineering.
Thank you. I know we talked a little bit about some of these quick wins, but also accelerating data science. And I know from many Hangout conversations, data can be so isolated across organizations, and there's so many different silos. How do you recommend that teams start bringing these diverse data sources together?
Jing, do you want to get started?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure, I can start. Again, it actually echo back to the quick win. Usually, just like Ning said, if you come up to say, oh, we need to standardize, we need to connect, people will nod their head, but they're not going to really commit. It's like, yeah, sounds like a good idea. No reason not to, play along, but whatever, right? But usually what we do, and it's out of necessity for a smaller company, is concrete project, right? Concrete project, it turns out, because in our company, we want to really leverage the resource and talents across site. We went through several acquisitions in the last couple of years, and we really diversified our talents. And we realized, oh my God, like there is a, resource and talents in this side, although the project is initiated by this legacy company, and just to enable that talent can access that data, then there's a concrete problem you have to solve instead of calling it. So basically it's almost bottom up. Start with project to say, hey, see how much efficiency we can create instead of hiring outside consultant, we have internal talent resource to tackle it together and break silos. And then that become an ecosystem. You get a lot of buy-in from cross-functional stakeholders. Then it's the time to maybe start an initiative. And that's how we came about. How about you, Ning?
Yeah, Jing, I totally agree. I think like starting from something concrete, and I think like Jing, you and me also discussed a little bit on like whether it's a matter of bringing data together or it's a matter of bring the people together, like the data scientists together. Yeah, I think I resonate in that a lot because like Roche is a huge company and it's impossible to bring all the data together. Like even combining or kind of integrating data from clinical trials, which seem like a straightforward task, is not that easy. So it's actually a huge task over there. On the other side, I feel like a quick win, like to Jing's point, is maybe bringing the data scientists together. For example, in Roche, like in pharma, like we have data scientists wearing different hats. There are people who are really, really good at clinical trial design, clinical trial data analysis. There are people really good at real-world data analysis. There are people really good at genomic analysis. And sometimes we see that like actually like each person is only kind of like representing their own kind of like specialty, and then they only share their results like to the stakeholders, for example, clinicians. And then for the clinicians, actually, it could be confusing if the clinician like see some result from real world data, some result from clinical trial data, some result from biomarker data. And we all know that there is no 100% consistency like across different data sources, like all the models are wrong, all the data are wrong. Yeah, so kind of how to triangulate, navigate through those data sources. It is not a expertise from the clinicians, from our stakeholders. Actually, it is our expertise. It's an expertise like of data science to really kind of like take all those diverse results in and find an interpretation and acknowledging the limitation of each data sources. So yeah, one thing we try to kind of like encourage our people to do is bring those data scientists together and then kind of have this like data science team. And in some cases, there is a data science team leader who can really like bring those data together and share to our stakeholders a actionable interpretation or even some options for development rather than just say, hey, there are like 20 pages report, go read it and figure out how to do with it. Yeah.
And I can maybe add one thing. I was in a senior leadership on the data science forum. We talked about, and a common theme is, it may sound mundane, but when we say bring data together, it is very worthwhile to figure out for each stakeholder what that means. And you'll be very surprised that actually may mean very different thing. One person may be meaning we have to standardize literally into one database. One person may be, oh, I just need the data could be linked together. They could be conjoined, whatever. I don't care where they sit. It could be even further loose, as Ning said, I just need different data scientists at different sites to be able to access so they can analyze the data. So what bring data together means figure out that understanding difference. And then as a data science leader, you come in for that specific problem to say, what makes the best sense for this particular project? Right? Then you educate all the cross-functional stakeholder to say, I know you initially saw it means this, but for this project, because of ABC, we really need to do either just this or more this, right? To enable the project to go forward. That really help establish your technical leadership and strategic leadership, because the cross-functional leader is very important for them to feel they have been heard, right? Instead of we just rush into our own assumption, they were like, what? This is not what I thought what data together even means, right? So spend the time at the beginning to do this understanding alignment will benefit tremendously down the road.
Maybe real quick here on this like nodding head problem. If you do find yourself in a meeting where that's happening, like I know there's all the things we could do before, but how do you like address it and stop that?
I
Right?
can also chime in,
Yeah.
right? It depends on things, right? If it is really just, oh, bring to the awareness, bring data intelligence across functions without a need for a concrete output, nodding head is great. Then you follow up with a quick survey, oh, 90% support, right? That's just wrapping the project up. It's a great success. We increase the awareness. However, if it's an urgent project, I think instead of relying on other people to be a strategic leader, we have to step up to do more things technical. I encourage my team members, including myself, we have action item beforehand. We say, if you agree, please do this by this week, right? Or if you need to review, here's the time frame, we can answer question, blah, 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 blah. But we expect you to take this action by this time if you agree with the general plan. If you have other things you need to sort out, clarify, whatever, we are here to help, right? And then you have a framework, a time frame. Then you kind of start nudging people. Like you said, you're going to deliver 3 weeks. That's what we decided in this meeting, followed by meeting minutes. Where's the progress, right? So you start the framework that will help make everybody accountable instead of just nodding head, right? You prepare ahead of time, like what is required, implied by you nodding your head.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also feel like sometimes when I talk to my team, like, yeah, sometimes I also see myself, and including myself, sometimes my team members, like we have the perception that we will present this problem to a meeting and magically in the meeting, someone will chime in and find a solution. But 90% of the time it won't happen, because for people in the meeting, they only think about this specific problem for like 30 minutes, an hour. And you have been thinking about this problem probably for weeks and months. And if you don't have a very clear, to Jing's point, if you don't have a very clear kind of like expected outcome or expected next step, like for this project, that no one in the meeting will come up a better plan over there. Yeah.
Thank you. George, I see you put a question to the chat. You want to jump in here?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, my question goes along the lines, I guess, as it relates to and I think you talked about it earlier, like getting some buy-in. So when thinking about automating some data science workflows, I think the not an issue, but one thing that may come up is like, well, I don't want this tool that you're building to replace me, right? I don't want this to like automate me out of a job kind of thing, right? So like you want to influence or you want to sell the tools that you build based on the needs of that person internally. How do you go about the better like translating that, right? Or getting that buy-in from people to see like, yeah, like this self-service tool or this tool that can help you automate some statistical analysis or whatever can help in your workflow, not meant to replace you, but assist you. How do you go about that?
Maybe I'll get started with Jing. Please feel free to chime in. Yeah, I feel like in my mind, like kind of like when you talk to people like about their day-to-day job, there are definitely things they enjoy doing and there are things they don't enjoy doing. And oftentimes the things they don't enjoy doing are the ones we try to automate over there. Those are the repetitive tasks. Those are things can be standardized, etc. Yeah, so I think, yeah, I totally agree with you. I think there is a fine balance over there, kind of like trying to like align with people or make people realize that by automating certain tasks that allow you to have more time to work on the things that you enjoy about, and also to ensure people that in the portfolio there are sufficient amount of work that you will be more interesting and more impactful than kind of doing this repetitive job every day. So I think that's the approach I would take. Yeah.
Totally agree. I think, from a personal level, make sure it's, more enjoyable. And then definitely on both Ling and my case, we just have way more work we can handle. So, and I think from business level, right, there are two ways. One is kind of not offensive, but proactive, right? Being able to automate a lot of the tedious, repetitive work, we will be more innovative, right? We'll be more at the cutting edge and more competitive in our own business. And we'll be able to use our insight instead of just the technical capability of doing repetitive work to basically create not only more work for ourselves, create more data insight value for the company, right? So our position, our function is more important. We can really help the company as with what we discussed at the very beginning. And also from a defensive point of view, if you just coming out of the fear, oh, I couldn't lay off people, so let's not automate, you become obsolete. You become much less efficient compared to your competitors in the same space, right? Then the company will suffer. That will be probably more a realistic risk when the company suffers, then you will be laid off or whatever, right? Versus thinking about you being replaced by a more modern technology. You can, if you're a competent data scientist, you should be able to create more values than just doing repetitive work.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Roy, I see you asked a question a bit earlier on interactions with the FDA. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Hi. Thanks for speaking, guys, today. So yeah, I guess, ultimately the ultimate goal of data science is to impact the downstream product. And so when you're dealing with the downstream product, you're going to have to deal with the FDA. So, there's a lot of interesting things you can do with data science, like, for example, synthetic control arms. I mentioned other, like a few other things, including selecting patients for clinical trials. I guess the FDA kind of has guidance, but, guidance is not binding, as you guys know. And so I want to know kind of what type of data science projects have you guys done, and have you kind of seen, kind of carry them through to kind of talking to the FDA with them about them, and what were your experiences with that?
I'll let Ning answer because we're not in the FDA space, so we're regulated in our IVD business by the European EMA, but I'll let Ning answer.
Sure. Yeah. So I think my example may be more toward the deliverable, but not too much about the design. I know that you mentioned about synthetic control, etc. I know there within Roche there are also a lot of colleagues who are like working on that, working closely with FDA in terms of kind of like having those more modernized design, getting buy-in for those more modernized design. And for myself, my involvement is more in the kind of like deliverable, like actual filing of like phase 3 trial of a product. Yeah, so basically I've been working in this space trying to kind of like enable the industry to use open source language and especially our language for FDA submission. Yeah, so I would say like, yeah, it is a process. It's definitely a process. Like exactly as you said, I think like from, I don't know which year, maybe Mike remember which year, I think it was like from 10 years ago, FDA like had this guidance saying that FDA is not requiring any statistical software for this like drug filing. However, like in reality, I think like every single company is using commercial software for their filing, and we don't see the needle being moved. So similar to the nodding head problem. And then so we started this like our consortium, our submission working group probably 4 years ago. And then the idea was kind of like having those publicly available examples showing actually sponsors can use open source software to do drug filing. Yeah, so like similar to the previous example, like we have like connection from FDA, like from FDA, they also have open source and services like from their group. So we identify those people, collaborate with them, and then like did those like pilot filings in the public space, showing people how to do that, and also kind of learn what is the best practice over there. So I think like definitely take time, but it's good to start small and start with individuals who are passionate about that. The other thing, what I learned is also in those cross-industry collaborations, it's very good learning experience to know like what's in it for them, like what's in it for FDA. Yeah, because like in FDA, like they have people who want to use open source language, but they also have limitations of their system, etc. Then like there are so much learnings in those cross-industry collaborations for us to realize that how can we make their life easier when review the application. Yeah, so I think that was like one example I want to share in this space. Yeah.
Thank you. And I wanted, oh, sorry, someone was about to jump in.
No, I just saw Mike like turn on his camera. I just wonder whether he want to chime in a little bit there. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I have to do this whenever I see Ning, because like her and our consortium submissions working group, I think are really transforming the future of submissions to regulatory authorities. The great thing about it is that it's it's bipartisan. So it's the industry and the regulators both looking at this together and saying, what shape do we want this to take in future? And you know, Ning, I think it would be a great opportunity if I'm not standing on Rachel's toes to talk about the submissions pilots. You know, because that's where the working group are trying things and sending things to regulators and getting the feedback and then reacting to that.
Mike, I'm always happy to have you be host with me too. Not stepping on any toes here.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe not derail the topic a little bit, but I can share maybe some learnings over there. So basically, we are wrapping up our pilot number 3 right now, and I think like one learning is that like kind of going back to Jing's point again, start small. So when we did pilot number 1, there's so much unknown over there, so the scope was really small. So for our pilot number 1, we decided to only do an experiment to submit 4 table graphics, and we're not doing any data set submission. And like we want to test out different tools, etc. It's really just a feasibility, like kind of testing at that time. And I think that was great, so that we can wrap up the pilot 1 in several months and get a formal kind of FDA letter saying that like this is feasible. Yeah, and after that, I think we became like bolder and bolder. And our pilot 2 was actually submitting a Shiny app, interactive app to FDA, so that they can redeploy the app on their system to do their review. And our pilot 3 is adding this kind of like adding this dataset component to show that like the open source language generated dataset, processed dataset can also reproduce what the commercial language produce. And then now we are looking to pilot 4, where we will introduce, again, very boldly introducing this container and also WebR component, which will be really, really interesting. Yeah, so I think the journey has been really nice to have this like iterative learning. And I see our goal become like bolder and bolder after knowing each other better. Yeah.
So I talked about this at PositConf last year, that over 30 years in industry, we've gone from paper submissions to PDF submissions, which are essentially the same things, but with hypertext links, right? But what I think we're getting to with the WebR and with the submissions for pilot is something utterly different, really fundamentally different. And that, I think that's really exciting, because it's getting into the 21st century. So we're typically, pharma industry is known for not moving terribly quickly, but I think this is an example where we are.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. Yeah.
So I know we just touched upon this question because you mentioned using R and you mentioned using Shiny, but Bill had asked, always interested in the infrastructure. So you said the focus is on models. How are these developed? What languages do you use? And do you use the cloud?
Yeah, I can share a little bit. I think, Jing, you guys probably are more advanced than us. Yeah, so like from Roche, like right now we are finally moving to a cloud infrastructure. Yeah, so previously for pharma, oftentimes we use commercial software, we use proprietary system, etc. Yeah, so it's a little bit black box sometimes, and also you can imagine that like it's really hard to add in like new features when there are new like AI models coming in or new language pop up like Julia, etc. So it's really hard to make them work on commercial like platform or like together with commercial language. Yeah, so we are in this process of moving to AWS-based infrastructure. And on the infrastructure, like we enable kind of data scientists to use like whatever language they found it being appropriate for their project. So our Python SAS like Julia, etc. Yeah, and we're in the middle of that. So this year we are hoping, like within Roche like product development data science, we are hoping to move 90% of our active molecules to this new platform. I hope like next year, once people settle down with the platform, etc., we will see more innovations and more like automated solutions, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, we're in a different regulation space. I would say not as rigorous as drug, and that provided us some flexibility. So R and Python has always been, kind of the building blocks and fundamental language we always use. And we then use specific language to tackle, for example, sequencing, sometimes tackle imaging analysis, and we just use whatever is the most fit and most advanced, right? It could change from year to year as well. We are really agnostic to the language we use, and infrastructure wise, there is definitely a move from on-prem to cloud. Interestingly, to add to the complexity, because our recent acquisitions, not only we leverage different cloud platform, there could be also regulation like GDPR restrictions, like we acquired 2 European company. What company can flow from US to Europe versus Europe to US, and how to control that in AWS could be not only a solid but sometimes complex problem. So we are definitely also in the journey. Yeah.
Thank you. Prabha, I saw you asked a question a little bit earlier. I'm trying to scroll up to see it, but do you want to jump in here?
In Genentech and Veracyte, how much of your work is initiated from data science personnel or teams versus business saying this is the priority?
I can provide, because our our product is machine learning model. So it is, I would say, in the most healthy organization, I certainly believe Veracyte is one. It's never one or the other. It's a joint one, right? So usually it's an iterative process. We say, hey, let's just start, right? Like one example, hey, you know, our commercial folks will come say, we continuously hear feedback to say, it would be really helpful to add a feature to our product, right? Or they will come say, well, it would be really helpful to add A and B and C to our product all at once, right? Then we'll say, hey, guess what? From a data science point of view, A needs 6 months development, you can deploy. B needs about 2 years. C, we are uncertain, we need to do phased approach, right? What is investment? Remember, finance people is in the leadership. What is investment in each? What is the ROI? What is uncertainty? Let's decide as a team, right? And then, you know, that's the initial data evidence we provide with our expertise, right? How long it will take to develop, how long, you know, how large is the investment, and then the commercial come back to say, guess what? Now I see ABC, each will give us how much more revenue or volume increase or stickiness from the customer. This is what we get. And then with that 2 pieces of information, we decide to say, hey, maybe sometimes it's a selection. Let's just try B because it's so quick. Or they will say, let's try B and A at the same time and hire more people because sounds so important. So it's really a dynamic, cross-functional decision for our business.
Yeah, I agree with Jing. Like I also feel like it's rarely a like A versus B, like kind of like functional interest versus business need. Oftentimes like these like have both component. Yeah, so from Roche, like we are actually, our culture actually encourage a lot of grassroots effort. So we encourage people to innovate in their daily work. So there are a lot of ideas popping up and etc. And then oftentimes those ideas are coming from actual study need. And then to the earlier point, there are the things people feel bored about, like the repetitive work, etc. Yeah, so oftentimes those are from actual need. And then a larger question is, some of those need are only tied with one particular project or one particular study. Some of them are applicable for the whole like a portfolio or across different projects, etc. So I feel like what our leadership team try to do is basically still encourage innovation, but if they see any kind of innovation, they see an innovation that can be applied as a like amplifier across a large number of projects, then they give a push to this project. Yeah, so like kind of like taking an example from myself, actually, when I joined Roche about 8 years ago, I was about statistician. So I was working on clinical trials, like doing design, doing clinical trial reporting. And at that time, I realized that there is opportunity for us to adopt open source languages and do better code sharing, code standardization, etc. So actually, it was kind of like my hobby project for several years until maybe like 3, 4 years ago. In Roche, we decided to double down to this strategy of adopting open source tools and platforms, and then this became my day job. Yeah, so I think like yeah, kind of like there is definitely a kind of like a incubation period, but like from our company, we encourage like all the like new ideas from the grassroots efforts. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. So I always like to sneak this question in, but is there a piece of career advice that you've received or that you've given others that you'd like to share with us?
I can start. So we usually are very technical. This is about communication, just to set the context. We're usually very technical people, but the audience sometimes, especially for strategic decisions, are usually not technical people. Sometimes we want to be so rigorous, we say our claim humbly, then add 20 caveat. Right? Does the 20 caveat really need to be said in the meeting? So I always say, really think about the audience. It's rarely that important what you're about to say or what you said. It's about what they hear, right? What do you want to get out of that conversation, right? then structure your communication. Be more confident on the positive claim if there is one, right? Maybe put the caveat in the notes section. You are no longer a student. You don't have to demonstrate your capability. We hired you. That's already enough. You should demonstrate what the result mean. What is the next step, right? How I can move the business forward. What is the impact to each cross-functional leaders beyond the technical caveat and technical details, right? So that's always a communication tip I give people who work as a data scientist or in data analytics in the industry setting.
I really like that. And I know from BBSW previous conferences, we also talk about this like decision science, like my side. So basically like to Jing's point, I think that the main goal is enable decisions, is to enable actions. It's not showcasing our capability that I can generate 200 outputs over there, or showcasing that I can do really complex model over there. It's really enable the next decision. And I remember I was like reading a book called like The Manager's Path, and then on one section it's saying like how do you manage your one-on-ones with your manager. And I think in my earlier career, like I always treat my kind of one-on-one as a reporting meeting, just a laundry list of things that I did, etc. And after reading that part, it really emphasized that treating every one-on-one meeting as an opportunity to ask your manager to help you with certain things, ask kind of like manage up to ask them to take certain actions to help you, or ask them to share certain context can help with your work. Yeah, I found that like really insightful. Yeah. And maybe another thing to add on is like also learn from BBSW. I think I learned so much from those nonprofit organizations is kind of like finding a mentor, finding a network of mentors. Yeah, I think for BBSW, it gave me the opportunity to meet a number of leaders in the Bay Area, and everybody have their own perspectives. Like everybody have different career journey. People working different type of companies, different type of groups, and I found that like having this like mentorship coaching, like the opportunity to get mentorship and coaching from a diverse group of people has been really, really helpful. Yeah, because I think like everybody have their blind side, and then what your manager believe or what your leadership teams believe may be slightly different than other leaders, and it's really helpful to get the diverse perspectives. Yeah.
I love that. Both of those. Thank you so much. I want to also give you a chance to share a little bit about that group that you're involved with as well, in case others in the Hangout may be interested too.
Jing, do you want to share
Sure.
the BBSW? Yeah.
Sure. So we both, Ning and I, we both work on the BBSW, the Bay Area Biotech Pharma Statistic Workshop. And if you just do bbsw.org, you get there. We have our exciting annual conference coming up at the end of October in Foster City in Bay Area. If you happen to be in Bay Area, that is one of the I'm biased, but still say one of the best conference. Really, not only we talk about cutting edge methodologies, we have now a data science track and a statistical track. So we talk a more broader topics, and we have also soft skill sessions. It is an emphasis, leadership coaching, and it is many people come back to say not only the technical and soft skill sessions are helpful, it's the best way to network, right? We have a lot of opportunities with breaks to networking with each other, really broaden your horizon. And the food, I think, is otherworldly. So many people come back to say that's the best food in any conference I've attended in their 10-year career, 20-year career, 30-year career. So that says something. So the food, and you can, it never always helps with yummy food when you network. Yeah, that's one. And we also have SFASA, the Bay Area ASA chapter. So sfasa.net. That's another nonprofit I'm working on. So that also has a lot of, again, Bay Area focus. If you are not in Bay Area, don't worry. There's another one called dashu.org, DAHSU.org. shu.org. That's a data science community. It's a global community. We have monthly seminars, and we have just restarted our annual in-person conference in Michigan in May after the pandemic. So that's another one you can connect, you can contribute. If you have topic you want to present, go for it. It's a platform for every person in the data science community. So that's all. Ning, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, maybe just for BBSW, like if you're not in the area, like I'm also co-hosting the BBSW meetups. Like we have probably 3-4 virtual meetups every year, and then the topics are very varying, from data science topics to soft skill topics to maybe disease area knowledge topics. Yeah, so you're more than welcome to join the Zoom meetings. And also, if you have any topics you're interested in, please feel free to share with me, and like we can try to reach out to the experts in the field. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Jing, thank you. I was just about to ask you what was the link to the second one.
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. I will be sure to share those links with the recording when I put it up to YouTube as well. I know there were a few questions that I missed from earlier, and I'm so sorry to have some questions go unanswered here. I feel like we could talk to you both for hours here. This has been great. I do see one last question because we have 3 minutes here. Saul, you had asked a question about different data science projects and recommendations. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I can. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Great. Yeah, Ning and Jing, thank you so much. You guys have such practical advice, and this is actually super useful. I did want to get you guys' perspective on, projects can be super complex. Sometimes they go in directions that are unexpected. Do you guys have any tips or recommendations for when a project maybe doesn't go as planned? Like maybe a product doesn't do as well as you guys had hoped, or maybe there's some side effects for a particular thing that wasn't foreseen, and how you guys normally handle that.
Maybe I can get started. I feel like the really hard problem to solve is to stop a project when it is not promising or it is not relevant anymore. And I think if I ask for my practical advice, I would say that if you feel like something is not right, then probably something is not right, and then speak up and have a honest conversation with leadership, etc., to see whether we want to stop it and how to stop it. Sometimes stopping it is not easy, especially if it's a cross-functional project. And if nothing works, my advice is try to move to another project. Try to find a more impactful project if you really don't see a value in this project. Yeah. Jing.
Very true, and echoes earlier point about managing up. This is a perfect discussion you can bring to your manager. I always tell my team, and I practice with my manager, is you don't always do the status report and give me the good news. I can read that on a conference page, right? Use me as a thinking partner. Bring the question, right? And then as a data scientist, one important but sometimes awkward and question you don't want to ask is this still a data science question to solve? For the project, even everything works well in the data science, putting the resource time aside. Let me say I can give you that data science answer right now. Would that solve the fundamental problem? Right, that may help people thinking, because otherwise the human psychology tendency really just want to keep on going, not admitting this is already beyond the point of safe, right? You may be asking small questions to nudge people there.
Wow, super useful. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for joining us today and for all the great questions too. Ning and Jing, this has been awesome. I've loved this conversation, and I have so many lessons here to go and think about for my own role too. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Our pleasure.
Thank you. Very nice to meet everybody.
Yes, indeed. Let's keep in touch.
Have a great rest of the day.